Administrative error, that's what they called it. A glitch in the system that sent prisoner 847 Jaime to Irongate Penitentiary. The problem? Jaime was female. Irongate was an all-male maximum security prison housing the most violent offenders in the state. By the time they realized the mistake, she was already processed, stripped of her belongings, and walking into Genpop wearing standard issue orange. 200 hardened criminals stopped what they were doing and stared. The warden made an announcement. Temporary situation. Keep your distance. She'll be transferred out within 48 hours. 48 hours. In a place where men were serving life sentences with nothing to lose. Tank, a 300-pound gang leader doing 25 to life for murder, watched her from across the yard. He turned to his crew and laughed. 48 hours? She won't last 48 minutes. What Tank didn't know was that Jaime had been arrested for putting 12 Navy SEALs in the hospital during a Black Ops training exercise gone wrong. She wasn't some random woman thrown to the wolves. She was the wolf. Stay with me until the end, because when Tank makes his move in the showers, what happens next will make every man in that prison question everything they thought they knew about power. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Now, let's get started. The concrete walls of Irongate Penitentiary had witnessed every form of violence imaginable over the past 40 years. Stabbings in the cafeteria, riots in the yard, gang wars that left bodies stacked like cordwood. But in all that time, those walls had never witnessed anything quite like this. Jaime Chen stood 5'4" in her standard issue boots. Her black hair was pulled back in a regulation ponytail, and her orange jumpsuit hung loose on her compact frame. To every man staring at her, she looked like prey that had wandered into a den of predators. They saw vulnerability. They saw opportunity. They saw 48 hours of entertainment. What they couldn't see was the 18 years of martial arts training that had transformed her body into a weapon more lethal than any shank hidden in a mattress. They couldn't see the classified military operations she'd completed in countries that didn't exist on any map. They couldn't see the underground fighting circuits where she'd earned the nickname the Silent Storm for the way she demolished opponents twice her size without making a sound. The intake officer who'd processed Jaime's paperwork hadn't bothered looking past her gender and size. Female, 120 pounds, no visible tattoos or gang affiliations. He'd stamped her file and moved on to the next case. Just another glitch in a system that processed thousands of criminals every year. But if that officer had dug deeper into her military record, the parts that weren't classified, he might have noticed something unusual. Jaime Chen had been arrested, not for selling drugs or armed robbery like most inmates. She'd been charged with aggravated assault on federal agents during what the reports described as a training exercise that exceeded authorized parameters. The truth was more complicated. Jaime had been recruited straight out of high school for a Black Ops program that didn't officially exist. For 6 years, she'd been the military's secret weapon, deployed to situations where conventional soldiers couldn't operate. Her specialty was infiltration and elimination. Get in, complete the mission, get out. No witnesses, no evidence, no paperwork. The program had ended when a routine training exercise went sideways. 12 Navy SEALs had been tasked with capturing Jaime in a simulated hostage scenario. It was supposed to demonstrate her skills to some Pentagon officials who were questioning the program's effectiveness. What those officials witnessed instead was Jaime systematically dismantling an entire SEAL team using nothing but her bare hands and the environment around her. When the smoke cleared, 12 of America's elite warriors were being loaded into ambulances. 3 had broken bones. 4 had concussions. 2 required surgery. All of them would recover, but their egos never would. The Pentagon shut down the program the next day, and Jaime found herself facing federal charges for excessive force during a training exercise. Her lawyer had negotiated a plea deal. 5 years in federal prison instead of 20. What nobody had anticipated was the computer error that sent her to a state maximum security facility instead of the minimum security federal camp where she was supposed to serve her time. Cell Block D was Tank's domain. Anthony Tank Rodriguez had earned his nickname the old-fashioned way, by running through opponents like an armored vehicle through tissue paper. At 6'6" and 300 pounds of muscle built during 15 years of prison workouts, Tank was the undisputed king of Iron Gate's most violent section. His crew controlled everything that mattered: drug distribution, protection rackets, the underground fighting matches that guards pretended not to see. Tank had built his empire on fear and maintained it through brutal efficiency. Cross him, and you disappeared. Challenge him, and you ended up in the infirmary or the morgue. When word reached Tank that a woman had been mistakenly sent to their block, his first reaction was laughter. Then came curiosity, then opportunity. In a place where respect was earned through violence and maintained through intimidation, having a woman under his protection would be the ultimate status symbol. She would owe him everything, and Tank always collected his debts. Jaime's first night was spent in a single cell, a temporary arrangement while the warden figured out how to handle the situation. The cell was 8 feet by 10 feet of concrete and steel, a narrow bed with a thin mattress, a steel toilet and sink combination, walls covered in graffiti from previous occupants, each mark telling a story of desperation and rage. She sat on the edge of her bed, her posture perfect despite the chaos swirling around her. Years of meditation training had taught her to find calm in any environment. The shouting from other cells, the clanging of metal doors, the constant undercurrent of violence, it all faded into background noise as she centered herself for what was coming. Because Jaime knew something that everyone else seemed to have forgotten. 48 hours was a long time, long enough for word to spread through every cell block that there was fresh meat in Genpop, long enough for the predators to start circling, long enough for someone like Tank to decide that the rules didn't apply to him. She had survived 6 years in the most dangerous places on Earth by staying 3 steps ahead of everyone around her. Prison might be a different battlefield, but the principles remained the same. Assess the threats, identify the power structure, wait for the inevitable confrontation, then respond with overwhelming force. The next morning brought the sound of cell doors sliding open and boots echoing through corridors. Jaime rose before the wake-up call, as she always did. Military discipline was a habit that prison couldn't break. She made her bed with hospital corners, organized her few belongings, and prepared for her first full day in hell. The cafeteria buzzed with an energy that felt electric. Conversations died as she entered. Heads turned. Eyes followed her every movement. Some inmates looked curious, others hungry. A few seemed almost sympathetic, recognizing that they were about to witness something terrible. Jaime moved through the serving line with fluid grace, her awareness absolute. She cataloged every face, every gesture, every potential threat. The kitchen workers who stared too long, the guards who seemed more interested in watching the show than maintaining order. The clusters of inmates positioned strategically around the room, and at the center of it all sat Tank and his crew, holding court like some twisted version of royalty. 6 men who commanded fear through reputation and violence. They occupied the best table in the cafeteria, positioned where they could see everything while keeping their backs protected. Tank watched Jaime with the predatory focus of a shark circling wounded prey. His massive hands dwarfed the plastic tray in front of him. His eyes never left her as she found an empty table in the corner, sitting with her back to the wall and a clear view of all exits. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Every inmate knew that something was building. The only question was when Tank would make his move and how bloody the aftermath would be. What none of them realized was that Jaime wasn't some helpless victim waiting to be rescued. She was a predator in sheep's clothing, and she was getting ready to remind everyone what happened when you confused kindness for weakness. Weakness. Jaime finished her breakfast in silence, each bite measured and deliberate. The stale bread and watery eggs tasted like cardboard, but she'd eaten worse during survival training in the mountains of Afghanistan. Food was fuel, nothing more. She needed to maintain her strength for what was coming. Across the cafeteria, Tank leaned back in his chair, his massive frame making the steel seat look like children's furniture. He whispered something to the man beside him, a thin Latino with teardrop tattoos named Viper. Both men laughed, their eyes never leaving Jaime's table. The morning passed with agonizing tension. During yard time, Jaime walked the perimeter alone, while clusters of inmates watched from the weight pit and basketball courts. She moved with purposeful strides, her gaze sweeping the concrete walls topped with razor wire, 20 feet high. 3 layers of fencing, guard towers positioned at each corner. She cataloged every detail, every potential escape route, every blind spot where violence could unfold unseen. Tank and his crew occupied their usual spot near the pull-up bars. They made no attempt to hide their surveillance. This was psychological warfare, and they wanted Jaime to know she was being hunted. The anticipation was part of their strategy. Let the prey sweat, let fear do half the work before the actual confrontation began. But Jaime felt no fear. Fear was a luxury she'd abandoned years ago during her first classified mission in Somalia. Fear clouded judgment. Fear made you hesitate. Fear got you killed. What she felt instead was a familiar calm settling over her like armor. Her breathing remained steady. Her pulse stayed normal. Her mind calculated angles and distances with mechanical precision. A younger inmate named Rico approached her near the fence line. He couldn't have been more than 22, with nervous eyes and the soft build of someone who'd never seen real violence. "Lady, you need to know something," he whispered, glancing around to make sure no one was watching. "Tank's planning something for tonight. In the showers. After count." My cellie heard him talking to his boys. Jaime stopped walking and looked at Rico directly. His warning was genuine, born from whatever small spark of decency still survived in this place. "I appreciate the heads up," she said quietly, "but I'll be fine." Rico's eyes went wide with disbelief. "You don't understand. Tank's killed 3 men in here, with his bare hands. He's got 6 guys backing him up, and the guards won't be around. You need to ask for protective custody. Get yourself transferred out of Genpop. Running away doesn't solve problems," Jaime replied, her voice carrying the same quiet certainty that had once reassured terrified hostages in Syrian bunkers. "It just postpones them." The afternoon dragged on with the slow inevitability of storm clouds gathering. Jaime spent time in the library, a cramped room filled with donated books that smelled of mildew and desperation. She selected a worn copy of Sun Tzu's Art of War and found a corner table where she could read while maintaining visual contact with all entrances. The librarian, an elderly woman named Mrs. Patterson, who'd worked at Irongate for nearly 2 decades, approached with obvious concern. "Honey, maybe you should stay close to the guards today. Word's going around that there might be some trouble tonight." Jaime looked up from her book, where she'd been reading about the importance of choosing your battlefield. Trouble has a way of finding people whether they're ready for it or not. Better to meet it on your own terms. Mrs. Patterson shook her head sadly. She'd seen too many young inmates destroyed by this place, their futures snuffed out by violence they never saw coming. "That's a hard way to live, child." "It's the only way I know how to live," Jaime replied, returning to her reading. As evening approached, the tension in cell block D became almost unbearable. Conversations died to whispers. Men moved with the careful deliberation of animals sensing a predator nearby. Even the guards seemed on edge, their usual casual demeanor replaced by heightened alertness. Jaime made her way to her cell as the count began. 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. Each hour brought her closer to the confrontation she'd been expecting since the moment she walked through Irongate's gates. At 10:30, the lights went down for the night. At 11, The guard rotation shifted. At 11:15, Jaime heard the soft whisper of footsteps moving through the corridor with practiced stealth. She rose from her bed and moved to the small window in her cell door. The hallway stretched empty in both directions, lit only by the dim glow of emergency lighting. But she could hear them. 6 sets of feet moving with the coordinated precision of a pack hunting prey. Jaime stepped away from the door and began her breathing exercises. 4 counts in. Hold for 4. 4 counts out. Hold for 4. The rhythm slowed her heart rate and sharpened her focus until the world narrowed to crystal clarity. At 11:30, her cell door opened with the soft click of an electronic lock being overridden. Tank's crew had inside help. A guard on the payroll or a maintenance worker with access to the security systems. It didn't matter. What mattered was that 6 dangerous men were about to enter her cell expecting to find a terrified woman cowering in the darkness. Instead, they found Jaime standing in the center of the small space, her posture relaxed, her breathing controlled, her eyes reflecting the dim light like a cat's. Tank filled the doorway, his massive silhouette blocking out the corridor light. "Well, well, well," he rumbled, his voice carrying the confidence of a man who'd never lost a fight. "Looks like our little princess is ready for her welcoming party." Viper slipped in behind him, followed by 4 other crew members. They spread out as much as the confined space allowed, forming a semicircle that blocked any escape route. Each man carried a different weapon. Viper had a shank made from a sharpened toothbrush handle. Another held a sock filled with batteries. Tank needed no weapon beyond his massive fists. "Here's how this works, princess," Tank continued, stepping closer. "You can do this the easy way or the hard way. Easy way, you become my property. I protect you. You show me appreciation. Hard way, we take what we want anyway. And you spend the next 47 hours in the infirmary." Jaime remained perfectly still, her voice calm when she spoke. "There's a third option you haven't considered." Tank laughed, a sound like grinding concrete. "Yeah? What's that?" "You walk away. Right now. All of you. And we pretend this never happened." The laughter that erupted from Tank's crew echoed off the concrete walls. 6 hardened criminals found genuine humor in the idea that a small woman was offering them an escape route from their own ambush. Tank wiped tears from his eyes. "Princess, you got heart. I'll give you that. But heart don't mean nothing when you're outweighed 3-1. Weight isn't everything," Jaime replied, shifting her stance almost imperceptibly. To an untrained eye, she still looked relaxed, but her feet had moved to shoulder width apart. Her center of gravity had lowered by 2 inches. Her hands hung loose at her sides, ready to move in any direction. "Leverage is everything." Tank's expression shifted from amusement to irritation. "Enough talking. Boys, hold her down." What happened next would be discussed in hushed whispers throughout Irongate for years to come. The moment Viper reached for Jaime's arm, she moved with fluid precision that defied the laws of physics. Her left hand deflected his grab while her right struck his wrist, with surgical accuracy. The shank clattered to the floor as Viper screamed. His wrist bent at an impossible angle. The second attacker swung his battery-filled sock in a wide arc toward her head. Jaime ducked under the swing and drove her elbow into his solar plexus with enough force to lift him off his feet. He collapsed, gasping for air that wouldn't come. Tank roared and lunged forward with his massive hands reaching for her throat. But Jaime wasn't there when his fingers closed. She'd slipped to his right side and struck a pressure point below his armpit that sent lightning bolts of agony down his arm. His right hand went numb instantly. The confined space of the cell worked against Tank's crew. Their numbers meant nothing when they couldn't coordinate their attacks. Jaime flowed between them like water, each movement precise and economical. She struck pressure points that dropped men like stones. She used their own momentum against them, turning their aggression into devastating force. In less than 30 seconds, 5 of Tank's crew were on the floor, some unconscious, others writhing in pain from techniques that caused agony without permanent damage. Jaime stood in the center of the chaos, her breathing still controlled, her orange jumpsuit barely wrinkled. Tank stared at the destruction with disbelief. His empire, his reputation, his crew, all of it destroyed by a woman who looked like she should be teaching elementary school instead of dismantling grown men with her bare hands. "What are you?" he whispered, genuine fear creeping into his voice for the first time in 15 years. Jaime looked at him with something that might have been pity. "I'm someone who tried to warn you. I'm someone who gave you a chance to walk away. I'm someone who doesn't want to hurt anyone unless they force my hand." Tank's face flushed red with humiliation and rage. In front of his crew, in front of witnesses. His authority had been shattered by a woman half his size. Prison hierarchy was built on fear and respect. Both had just been stripped away in the span of half a minute. "This isn't over," Tank snarled, backing toward the door. "You hear me? This isn't over." "Yes, it is," Jaime replied quietly. "Because if you come at me again, I won't hold back. And you really don't want to see what that looks like." "Looks like." Tank stumbled backward, his massive frame trembling with a mixture of rage and something he hadn't felt in decades. Fear. Real, bone-deep terror that came from recognizing a predator far more dangerous than himself. His crew lay scattered around Jaime's cell like broken toys, some moaning softly, others completely still. "Clean this up," Jaime said quietly, her voice carrying the calm authority of someone accustomed to giving orders in life-or-death situations. "Get them medical attention if they need it. And Tank, next time you want to have a conversation, try knocking first." Tank opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. His reputation, built over 15 years of brutal dominance, had crumbled in 30 seconds. He looked at his fallen crew, then back at the small woman standing untouched in the center of the destruction. Without another word, he began dragging his injured men from the cell. Word spread through Irongate like wildfire. By morning, every inmate knew what had happened in cell block D. The details grew with each telling, but the core truth remained unchanged. Tank and his crew had been dismantled by a woman who weighed less than any two of them combined. Jaime woke before dawn, as she always did. She performed her morning routine with mechanical precision. 100 push-ups, 200 sit-ups, meditation for 20 minutes. The concrete floor of her cell was as good as any dojo floor she'd ever trained on. When the cell doors opened for morning count, the corridor was different, quieter. Men moved with careful respect, giving Jaime space as she walked to the cafeteria. Conversations stopped when she passed. Eyes followed her with a mixture of fear and fascination. In the cafeteria, Jaime noticed the immediate change in seating arrangements. Tank's usual table sat empty. His crew was nowhere to be seen, probably still nursing their injuries in the infirmary or hiding in their cells. Other gang leaders watched her with calculating eyes, reassessing everything they thought they knew about power dynamics in this place. Rico approached her table with obvious nervousness. "Lady, everyone's talking about last night. They're saying you put 6 guys in the hospital without breaking a sweat." "I didn't put anyone in the hospital," Jaime replied, cutting into her powdered eggs with plastic utensil. "I defended myself. There's a difference. Tank's calling in favors from outside the prison. His connections on the street. Word is he's putting a bounty on your head. $5,000 to whoever takes you down." Jaime paused her eating and looked directly at Rico. "That's his choice. But you should know something about bounties. They tend to attract the wrong kind of attention. Amateur hour killers who think money makes them dangerous. Ain't you scared? Even a little?" "Fear is just information," Jaime said, echoing words she'd spoken to terrified soldiers in combat zones around the world. "It tells you to be prepared, but it doesn't control your actions." The morning passed with an eerie calm that felt like the eye of a hurricane. Jaime spent time in the yard, walking the perimeter while maintaining awareness of every person around her. The weightlifters gave her respectful nods. The basketball players paused their games when she passed. Even the guards seemed different, watching her with professional curiosity rather than dismissive indifference. At 10:30, the warden's assistant arrived at her cell. "Chen, you're wanted in administration. Now." Warden Phillips was a career corrections officer who'd seen everything during his 30-year tenure. Gang wars, riots, murders, suicides. He prided himself on maintaining order through a delicate balance of authority and calculated compromise. But Jaime's situation was something entirely new. "Sit down, Chen," he said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. "We need to talk." Jaime remained standing. "I prefer to stand, sir." Phillips studied her for a long moment. She stood at attention with military bearing, her hands clasped behind her back, her eyes focused somewhere over his left shoulder. Despite everything that had happened, she showed him the respect his position demanded. "You've created quite a situation here," Phillips began. "Tank Rodriguez has been the unofficial leader of Cell Block D for over a decade. His crew kept order through fear, but it was order nonetheless. Now that structure is gone. Sir, I was defending myself against an unprovoked attack. Prison regulations clearly state that inmates have the right to protect themselves from assault. 6 men, Chen. You put 6 dangerous felons down like they were children. Tank's been in 3 fights since he arrived here 15 years ago. He's never lost, never even been seriously hurt. Now he's walking around with his arm in a sling, talking about hiring outside contractors." Jaime's expression didn't change. "What are you asking me, sir?" Phillips leaned back in his chair, his weathered hands folded across his stomach. "I'm asking what the hell kind of training you have that lets a 120-pound woman dismantle half a dozen killers without breaking a sweat." "Military training, sir. Specialized programs that are above my clearance level to discuss. Black Ops. I can neither confirm nor deny that, sir." Phillips laughed despite himself. Even sitting in his office, facing potential chaos throughout his prison, Jaime maintained operational security like she was still on active duty. "Chen, I've got a problem. Tank's crew controlled drug distribution, gambling, and protection rackets throughout the prison. Without that structure, we're looking at a potential power vacuum. Other gangs are going to move in. The Aryan Brotherhood, MS-13, the Mexican Mafia. We could have a full-scale war on our hands. Sir, that's not my responsibility. I'm just trying to serve my time quietly." "Quietly?" Phillips stood and walked to his window overlooking the yard. "Chen, there's nothing quiet about what you did last night. You've upset the entire ecosystem of this prison. Whether you intended to or not, you've made yourself a player in this game." Jaime remained silent, understanding the implications. In places like Iron Gate, neutrality was a luxury that ceased to exist the moment you demonstrated superior force. Every gang would now see her as either a potential ally or a threat to be eliminated. "Sir, what are you suggesting?" Phillips turned back to face her. "I'm suggesting that maybe we can use this situation to our advantage. You've proven you can handle yourself. Maybe it's time someone with actual training took control of Cell Block D instead of letting it fall into chaos." The suggestion hung in the air like smoke from a fired weapon. Phillips was essentially asking Jaime to become a gang leader herself, to step into the power vacuum she'd created by destroying Tank's crew. "Sir, with respect, I'm not interested in running a criminal enterprise. I'm not asking you to run drugs or organize fights. I'm asking you to maintain order. Keep the peace. Make sure the other gangs don't turn my prison into a battlefield." Jaime considered the proposal carefully. It would mean abandoning her plan to serve her time quietly and avoid attention, but it might also be the only way to prevent the bloodshed that would inevitably follow Tank's fall from power. "And in return?" Phillips smiled grimly. "In return, I make sure you serve your full sentence here at Iron Gate instead of getting transferred to that minimum security federal facility where you were supposed to be. You'll have my backing, protection from outside contractors, access to better food, better accommodations, and the respect that comes with running the most powerful block in the prison." It was a devil's bargain. Accept leadership of a criminal organization in exchange for protection and privilege. Refuse and face the chaos that would consume the prison when rival gangs moved to fill the power vacuum. Sir, I need time to consider this. You've got until tomorrow morning. After that, I start making arrangements to transfer you to protective custody. And Chen, once you're in PC, you'll never come out. You'll spend the next 5 years in a concrete box, isolated from the general population. Jaime nodded, understanding. Protective custody was safety, but it was also surrender. It meant admitting that she couldn't handle life in general population, that she needed the system to protect her from other inmates. One more thing, sir. The transfer to federal minimum security. When was that supposed to happen? Phillips consulted his computer screen. According to my records, never. Your sentence was always supposed to be served here at Irongate. That federal facility transfer you mentioned? There's no record of it in your file. Jaime felt a cold realization settling in her stomach. The administrative error hadn't been sending her to the wrong prison. The error had been telling her she was supposed to be somewhere else. She'd been sent to Irongate deliberately, but someone had wanted her to believe it was a mistake. Sir, who authorized my transfer here? Phillips frowned and clicked through several screens. That's odd. The authorization came from federal level, but it's marked as classified, above my clearance to access. Someone with serious pull had wanted Jaime in this exact prison. But why? What purpose did it serve to place a highly trained operative in a maximum security facility filled with violent criminals? Sir, permission to return to my cell to consider your offer. Granted. But Chen, understand something. Tank's not going to let this slide. He's already reached out to contacts on the outside. Professional killers who specialize in prison hits. You've got maybe 48 hours before they make their move. Jaime walked back to cell block D with her mind racing through possibilities. Someone had orchestrated her placement at Irongate. Tank's attack hadn't been random opportunity. It had been inevitable. And now she was being offered leadership of the very organization she'd just destroyed. The pieces of a larger puzzle were starting to come together, but the picture they formed was troubling. Someone wanted her in a position of power within the prison system. But who? And why? As she entered her cell, Jaime found a note tucked under her mattress. The handwriting was neat, feminine, completely out of place in this environment of chaos and violence. The game is bigger than you think. Trust no one, especially the warden. Your real enemies aren't wearing orange. The note was unsigned, but it confirmed Jaime's growing suspicion that her presence at Irongate was part of something much larger than an administrative error. She was being maneuvered into position for a purpose she didn't yet understand. Outside her cell, she could hear whispered conversations as word spread about her meeting with the warden. Alliances were already forming. Lines were being drawn. The power structure of Irongate was reshaping itself around the vacuum she'd created by destroying Tank's crew. Tomorrow morning, she would have to give Phillips her answer. Accept leadership of Cell Block D and become a target for every gang in the prison, or accept protective custody and spend 5 years in isolation while missing the chance to uncover who had orchestrated her placement here. But tonight, she had more immediate concerns. Tanks. Outside contractors would be making their move soon. Professional killers who specialized in eliminating targets inside prison walls. They would be well-funded, well-equipped, and completely without conscience. Jaime sat on her narrow bed and began her evening meditation routine. 4 counts in, hold for 4, 4 counts out, hold for 4. The rhythm cleared her mind and prepared her for what was coming, because she knew with absolute certainty that tonight would bring violence unlike anything Irongate had ever witnessed. The question wasn't whether Tank's killers would come for her. The question was how many of them she'd have to put down before the sun rose on a very different kind of prison. And that's the story of how one administrative error changed everything at Irongate Penitentiary. Jaime Chen walked into that prison looking like easy prey, but she was actually the most dangerous person in the building. Tank and his crew learned the hard way that appearances can be deceiving, and sometimes the smallest person in the room is the one you should fear the most. What started as a simple case of mistaken identity turned into something much bigger. A conspiracy that reached beyond prison walls. A test that Jaime never asked for, but passed with flying colors. And a reminder that true strength doesn't come from size or reputation. It comes from discipline, training, and the quiet confidence of someone who knows exactly what they're capable of. Tank thought he was hunting a helpless victim, but he was actually walking into a trap set by someone who had spent years perfecting the art of controlled violence. The hunter became the hunted, and the entire power structure of the prison crumbled in 30 seconds of surgical precision. Jaime's story proves that you should never judge someone by what they look like on the surface, because sometimes the most dangerous predator is the one that doesn't look dangerous at all. Sometimes the wolf comes disguised as the sheep, and by the time you realize your mistake, it's already too late. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible tales of people who aren't what they seem. And let me know in the comments what you thought about Jaime's incredible display of skill. Was she right to defend herself the way she did, or should she have handled Tank's crew differently? I'll see you in the next video.